Riots go back centuries. Most riots happen for a reason or in retaliation of something that's happened or an event that occurred, and some riots happen just for the sake of it. Some change the future and some have been long forgotten. So here is my list of the 5 most costly riots. Number 5. The Watts Riots. On the 11th of August 1965 in Watts, Los Angeles, a 21-year-old African American named Marquette Frye was arrested as he failed to pass a sobriety test after being pulled over on his motorcycle. While he was getting arrested, people started to gather, wondering what all the commotion was about. What started as a few people gathering quickly became hundreds, generating an angry mob that began getting violent. Over the next few days, things were exacerbated as tensions grew. This turned into a riot between the races, and at the time, it was the most violence the city had ever seen. Rioters covered a 50 square mile area in central LA, looting, torching and assaulting whites and firefighters while snipers fired at the police. It took thousands of police officers, soldiers and an infantry division with tanks to break the rebellion. In all, 34 people died, 27 of which were African American. Over 1,000 people were injured and 3,500 people were arrested. Back then, the damages cost $40 million, which today translates to around $300 million. Number 4. The London Riots. Almost exactly 46 years later, between the 6th and 11th of August 2011, thousands of rioters in London and other cities around the UK took to the streets in response to Mark Duggan's death. On the 4th of August of this year, 29-year-old Mark Duggan was shot and killed by a police officer in Tottenham, London. The media at the time reported that Duggan fired first, but it turned out the bullet they retrieved was actually fired from a police gun. The police finally admitted there was no fire exchange. What started out as a peaceful march held by relatives and friends of Duggan seeking justice on the 6th of August soon turned into a series of looting and violence in Tottenham, later spreading throughout London, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Bristol, Manchester and other cities. It was also known as the Blackberry Riots because participants used mobile phones and social media to organise. The England riots was inspired by the bloody LA riots of 1992. Vehicles, shops and over 100 homes were destroyed during looting and arson attacks. This resulted in around £300 million worth of damages, 5 deaths and several dozen were injured. Number 3. The 1967 Detroit Riots. In July 1967, police raided an unlicensed bar in a predominantly black neighbourhood in, you guessed it, Detroit. They found a party of 82 celebrating the return of 2 Vietnam War veterans. Police arrested them all. As they were being carried away from the scene, over 200 took to the streets agitated by rumours that the police had used force. Shortly after, an empty glass bottle was thrown into the window of a police car and one of the most violent urban rebellions of the 20th century burst out. Also known as the 12th Street Riot due to the bar incident, the 1967 Detroit riots were a violent response to police brutality. The National Guard and the 82nd Airborne were called to repress the uprisings, which lasted 5 whole days. Looting, fires and murders led to 43 deaths, 1,200 were injured and around 7,000 were arrested. Over 2,000 buildings were burnt down in the process. And the cost? Over 100 million in property damage, translating to $700 million today. Number 2. The 1992 LA riots, also known as the Rodney King riots. In 1991, young African American Rodney King was caught speeding, and fearing that his probation for a robbery would be provoked, King led the police on a high-speed chase on the freeway. When he finally pulled over, a struggle ensued, which led the police officer into believing that King was resisting arrest. One officer shot him with a taser gun, while the other 3 officers beat him with batons. The entire incident was filmed by a witness who lived nearby. This footage can be found on YouTube. The 4 officers were tried for assault and use of excessive force by a white jury who found the offenders not guilty on the 29th of April 1992 despite the evidence against them. Within minutes after the verdict, anger and disappointment ignited the spark and the riots began. Liquor stores, fast food courts and white people were the main targets. On the 3rd day, Rodney King uttered the words that would forever be associated with the violent riot and overall racism, which was, "Can we all just get along?" Violence was centred around South Central LA and lasted for 6 whole days. The outcome? Over 4,000 injured, 53 dead, most of which were rioters and innocents who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The looting and civil disturbances caused 3,600 fires, destroying 1,100 buildings, and overall property damage cost of over $1 billion. And number 1, the 2002 Gujarat Riots. On the 27th of February 2002, a group of Muslims attacked the Sabarmati express train stationing in the city of Godhra in Gujarat and set it on fire. They threw rocks at the train so that people inside couldn't escape, which resulted in 58 deaths of mainly Hindu activists. What followed was a bloodbath that expanded for months throughout the Indian state of Gujarat. Muslim homes and businesses were torched, mosques and graves were destroyed, and Muslim men, women and children were brutally killed. While everyone acknowledges that the train incident triggered the violence, conflicts between Muslims and Hindus in India have been lurking for decades. Allegations of state complicity, as the state minister himself referred to the incident as a terrorist attack and deliberately allowed anti-Muslim offences, are the reason many argue that the violence should be classified as a pogrom. Seeking vengeance against Muslims, the Gujarat riots became the worst episode of Muslim-Hindu violence in India. Analysts claim that the incidents come close to the definition of genocide. When the riots finally stopped, over 1,000 deaths were counted, including 790 Muslims and 254 Hindus. 2,500 were injured, 600 children were left orphans, and 225 missing and presumed dead. The cost of property damage exceeds $1 billion by far. However, the real price to pay is the many lives forever lost and destroyed in the midst of the bloody uprisings. To put these costs into perspective, check out my first video, What $1 Billion Can Buy For You. And that's it. If you enjoyed this video or even learned something, then please give it a thumbs up. More videos are to come, so don't forget to subscribe. Peace. Peace.